A new business venture. This is something I'm particularly stoked out of my mind about. All right. So we bought all this cool podcast gear, and it's crazy how affordable it is, for one thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, we spent plenty of money getting some midline gear in the podcast studio, but like, I love podcasts. I love listening to them. I actually worked many years in the audio industry, so like live sound production, so I'm just super nerdy about all this stuff. So we're buying all this gear, and I'm like, why is there not a podcast studio in Lancaster? And like I looked it up. There's nothing. I mean, there's some recording studios that'll do podcasts, but to my knowledge, there is not a podcast studio in Lancaster County, which should have something like that available. So the new business venture is
starting a podcast studio.
Let's go. You guys think all this stuff, business, how do I figure it out? What's the next big idea? When you think about something, you Google it, and even if there's just one existing, because they have a monopoly if there's just one. But if there's nothing, fill the space.
Right.
Occupy the space.
Yeah. And how many people do you know? We should do a podcast about that, or we should, you know what I mean? But the barrier to entry, and especially the barrier to something of high enough quality to feel like it represents you. Like, if a business wants to start a podcast and they just buy 2 mics and sit in their conference room with fluorescent lighting and a handy cam, like, they're not, or webcam or whatever, they're not going to have the production value that feels like it's their brand. I don't think that should stop them.
Right.
But this is an option where you can come in and rent the studio for an hour or two and walk out that day, have a file delivered to you with your done for you podcast.
One of the things, I think you're spot on. Content is king. And when I say, I know we've all heard that content is king, but people have used that in the past for like just putting stuff out is king, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what you're saying is actually king, right? It's more critical. So you could have a fuzzy video and fuzzy audio, and if you're saying really, really good stuff, people will still listen to you.
Yeah.
However, one of my favorite things that Omar El Tukori from Think Media talks about is that everything about you are a brand.
Shout out Think Media.
Shout out to Think Media.
Check them out on YouTube.
Yes, they're an incredible resource for creators. But he says you are a brand. Everything about you is a brand. So the way you show up on camera is your brand, right? The way you're dressed is your brand. I mean, your glasses, all right? That's integrated into the BrandNerd culture.
We had to redesign the logo when I switched glasses.
Exactly. When you switch glasses, we literally changed the brand.
Yeah.
So I think about that. Even today, this morning, I was conscious of, what am I wearing today? And does that align with kind of like, my brand? Now, you can become over obsessed with that. I'm not saying to like be compulsive about that in an unhealthy way, but just to be mindful of, does your video and audio match the level of excellence that you are putting out? And it's true that people could have great audio and video and not really great content, but if you can consider both and master both.
One of the things that we talk about in live production is, so if you're behind the scenes, like I've run live sound for a lot of concerts and church services and things of that nature. One of the things that we say is your job is to not be noticed. So whenever you've probably been at a concert or a church service or something when like a mic isn't on in time for the person who starts speaking, or the video starts playing but there's no audio, or the audio is really low, or the audio is really loud, or your job is to not be noticed. Right. So the nice thing, that's production level. So the nice thing about like coming to a podcast studio that can help take away some of those things that people are going to notice that distract from what you're saying. Yep. So, if you've got grainy footage, or you've got poor lighting, or you've got bad audio, that all distracts from what you're saying. Yeah. And what's cool about this podcast, if somebody watches our first episode, second episode, now third episode, or they're gonna see a progression of how quickly this is ramping up. in production value.
Yeah. I was thinking as you just announced that kind of officially that, you could charge it by the hour, right? And do different packages, which you've already done. But my mind just went to, dude, what if you took this podcast studio and made it subscription based? Like what, like, you know what I'm saying? Like rather than paying X amount per visit, like, is there a way to even structure the packages, like have an hourly package, but then also have a subscription package where it's like you have access, you have X amount of hours per month based on this price point.
Yeah.
But you have to be locked in for part of the contingency is that you lock them in for 6 months or a year.
Right.
And it's like, that might even be.
So that is there.
That is there.
The
Okay.
pricing that's on the website is based on a 12 episode run.
Okay.
So essentially you buy 12 episodes at that hourly rate.
Gotcha.
So if you would just say, hey, we just want to do one episode, that would be a different rate.
Right. Okay. Understood.
And that's just, there's built-in efficiencies from working with somebody over time.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that we can be really flexible right now, like I want to see what is interesting to businesses, because for example, I was watching, I've consumed some content around this. There's not a lot of people that have podcast studios, but one of the people was saying, hey, we have a $5,000 a month done for you podcast bundle. We do all your artwork, your music, we edit, we create shorter form content out of your podcast, all of it done for you. It's just $5,000 a month. And I was going, I don't know many businesses that are going to pay $5,000 a month for a package like that. Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some, don't get me wrong. Maybe there's some, and certainly, like some of this is going to be hobbyists or people who kind of want to do this on the side. Right. Like I can't, like some people have money, they have cash to spend, but I don't think that's a reasonable starting point. I mean, that's kind of the high end. And I think we can do that. I know we can do that. Literally, we would just be doing what we're doing for our podcast. But that's always the way I've done business is I find something that works for my business and then I sell it to other people. So podcasting, that's exactly what this is. This is something that I'm investing in for my business. We're doing it the right way. We're doing it high quality, but we can also do that for other businesses and they can come in and just steal our playbook. Well, I could see even like, even the idea of doing a pod, like I could see businesses utilizing this format for even training videos. Like, I don't know why I'm thinking of like somebody coming in to do a conference call.
Really?
They're doing a conference call, but it's going to be recorded in a podcast form. They're doing like a virtual interview. And the people that they're doing the interview with like, well, can you go to a studio and record it so that we get the good audio from this versus just your phone? We've all listened to a podcast with the call-in audio and it's choppy and it's obviously an AirPod or a iPhone or God forbid a Android.
We're loyalists.
Green bubble. No,
I could totally see.
I get some of y'all are poor. That's all.
Exactly. No, I get it.
Maybe not poor financially, but poor in spirit.
Poor in taste as well. I could see someone using that for like a training video or a coaching call. Yeah. Right. Like, which is essentially what you're saying, but like so many different use cases. I mean, even if you're a YouTuber and you just want to sit in front of do a floating head, talking head video, you could do that, right? Like we could put this mic here, set you up behind the wall, and like you could record that with great.
Don't even get me started on like what this could be. Like I already have it in my head where like we have like 4 different sets where people can just come in. And one of them's a talking head set. One of them's and by talking head, I mean just like one person looking down the barrel of a camera. I definitely see that in the future. For now, what we have is exactly what you're seeing here. Plus, I'm sure every episode's going to look a little different until we get.
I think there's some big, medium to big size businesses. I'm thinking like the hospitals, right? Like I'm thinking, I don't know why Kreider Farms keeps coming to mind, but it's a local that they're big enough. But I could totally see them doing like an internal podcast for their employees that's quick. Yeah. Like, hey, today, You can tune into the whatever podcast, and it's only 5 to 10 minutes.
Right.
And we're just going to talk to you about our culture and our values. Right. So rather than us needing to pull the entire company together, it's like we can create a 10-part series that we want the whole company to listen to. Like, what if you instead of getting handed an employee handbook, what if you were handed a pod? And, and they were like, hey, there's 12 episodes on here.
Right.
They're each 5 to 10 minutes. Can you listen to them on the way home? Yep. And consume that content, like thinking differently about the way you're engaging your employees. Like that would be cool.
Yeah. I even think it would be cool to have a portable setup because when you're thinking like an entrepreneur, you're thinking about what are the obstacles that people have to overcome. And sometimes you can get super distracted by that, and that's not good. But I do think that's a legitimate obstacle. As some people are like, well, weekly, if it's for a business, I don't have the time to drive to your studio, be there for an hour and then drive back or whatever that might look like. Right. So my first thought was like, well, maybe we could be open weekends or something. Like they could do it, we could do it like a evening session type thing. But the other option too is actually a portable setup. Like this is a fairly portable setup, and we could systematize it so that it could be even more portable. Yeah. And then obviously there'd be a premium for it, but we can come to you, and you can find a wall with your logo in the back, or you can find a dark corner where we can light it really nicely, or whatever, whatever it might be, and do it on site and get that same production value on site.
Yeah, I just think with video, man, it starts to become like there's endless opportunities. Yeah. There's endless opportunities. Like I could even see a CEO doing a talking head video, just like a welcome video. Like you get hired. Like how cool would it be if you got hired from a company and you got a video sent to you just saying hi and welcome. Yeah. And like, we're so glad you're here. It wasn't like a bunch of stuff, but just thinking of different ways to, again, engage. You know who Gary Vee is? Yeah, of course. Okay. Yeah. I figured you did. Stupid question. Every now and then I ask people and they're like, no, who's that? And I'm like, okay. But there's a lot of things that Gary does and says that to me are too extreme, but I think his heart's in the right place and it's what he's doing. Like he is Mr. Hustle, do a gazillion things. Right. For me, I couldn't do that. But one of the things he says that I think is brilliant is that every company should view themselves as a media company that happens to sell a product in terms of the content that you're creating. Like, and that really is how the best brands in the world grow, is they have an attraction through media, their media, whether it's video, audio, or images. And people find them, they consume them. I mean, we have personalities, personal brands, talking personalities and stuff that just podcast or YouTube and then sell products off of that. They've got food products or alcohol products or all these different things, and it's a new monetization strategy for them to actually launch products on top of their media company. Right. So I just think it's one of those things that companies really need to consider. I don't know that it's an adapt or die type scenario, like maybe AI is eventually. But I do think it's super important. And when you combine the two, AI and this into your content creation like we're doing, it's just that next level superpower. Yeah. But so anyways, the podcast studio, let's get into a little bit of that. Currently it's just literally, I'm calling it podcast studio at the BrandNerd or at BrandNerd. Yeah. There's no name or brand. I didn't create a new brand for it. I use the same brand guidelines as the company. It's a page on the website, I have a company that does branding and websites and content marketing. It's just another service is the podcast studio. I could see it being kind of its own standalone service as well. Its own logo, its own name, but for now that's not what it is. So, but what I've done so far with it, I think it'd be interesting just for people to follow along on this journey. I know I love business journeys. We have not booked a single
paying guest or customer. All I've done though is talk about it on this podcast and post that one picture and talk to a couple friends. I did say we have somebody coming in to do an interview, I think it's either a podcast interview or some sort of interview where they need a good audio, and that's just a friend who was over for dinner and said, "Do you know a place where I could do this?" And I said, "Actually, I do."
Yeah.
So
Cool.
Come on over.
Yeah. Be a good test run too.
And I created a landing page. I used AI to write the copy. And so it was really fascinating going, I'm starting a podcast studio and I want you to write some compelling copy to tell people why they should come to my podcast studio. And the first thing it did was, all right, if you're going to do a podcast, here are some ideas for podcasting. I'm like, no. This is a podcast studio.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, here's some equipment for your podcast studio. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Have the equipment. It's not a podcast. It's a place where people come to record their podcast. It's a podcast studio. And then it nailed it.
Yeah.
It's like, and it was funny because like the transcript, like you see it and the transcript is like, oh, now I understand. You're doing a podcast studio where people come to record their podcast.
Right.
Yes, exactly. So I actually used it to write the copy. And then I said, what should I charge for this? And I said, can you write me some packages that I should include for this? And it literally, like I modified all of them, but it was, again, the blank page syndrome. Like it spit out exactly what I needed to get it to where I actually wanted it to be.
Right.
So yeah, super, super awesome.
That's awesome.
Using AI. And I mean, like from a marketing perspective, there's still some things to do.
Yeah.
We got to get the word out there. One of the things I always like to do with my website is have a lead gen of some sort, something people can download. So we'll create some sort of like podcast starter guide or something that they can grab on the website and start building out an email list for the studio. And then a content marketing plan specifically for the studio. Yeah. That's just, obviously it can piggyback on a lot of what we're doing here, which is awesome. Right. But starting to get the word out. Like,
even just to clarify too, we do want to make this a segment of future episodes. So we're kind of going to give intentional check-ins. Hey, here's where we're at with it. We booked one person. Like, what? That's crazy.
Exactly.
And hopefully, by a couple episodes, not a couple, but like maybe 10 to 20 episodes in, we've got a couple people booked, and awesome. Yeah,
and I haven't really decided. I don't know that I'm going to do any paid ads or anything just yet. I think I'm just going to let it kind of simmer because we don't need, like, it's not like, it's not like we've bought $1 million worth of gear and the bill's coming due soon. It's everything's bought and paid for, but it would be great to make it back and then some. Yeah. And I just think this is a need. Like, businesses need to be doing this. If we can make it easier from them and we can make it affordable for them and deliver really high value, then it's a no-brainer. If you enjoyed this Brand Nerd podcast clip, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. In the meantime, here are additional videos you might find illuminating.